Make no mistake about it. What they want to do is confiscate each and every single firearm from law-abiding citizens. And this is all why they let real criminals roam free to terrorize the now unarmed population. This is exactly what they're doing, and that's why crime is so out of control in Canada today. And Alberta is no exception. And then they say, well, it's voluntary. How can it be voluntary if you made my property that I purchased legally now illegal to possess? How is it voluntary if I am now in possession of illegal property? They're full of it. That's the answer. A report from our own very own police, our national police from the government, saying that Canadians are in such bad shape financially, economically, even socially, that once they realize just how bad things are, they may revolt. But at least I'm glad to see that Alberta's not buying into it. If anything, Alberta's actually resisting as much as possible and saying they're just not going to comply with the whole gun confiscation scheme. Here's an interview with Alberta Justice Minister where he says that the province is not going to be implementing any of the authoritarian confiscation scheme from Ottawa. Check it out.
Alberta Justice Minister Mickey Amory joins me now. Nice to see you, Minister. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me.
So you say that the Alberta government will not be enforcing what you call the federal gun grab. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it means that since the federal government first introduced this confiscation scheme, we've been absolutely and unequivocally clear. We will oppose any policy that undermines law-abiding firearms owners, including ineffective and extremely expensive buyback programs that don't actually speak to the root cause of the problem.
What should they expect, though, firearms owners in your province, when that amnesty period is over? Do you think that police in Alberta will be, looking for folks that have these now prohibited firearms and charging them with federal crimes? Because that is what the law states. Is that something that people in your province should be prepared for?
They better not.
Well, look, we've said that we will not cooperate with the confiscation scheme. We will not participate in any federal programs that create criminals out of law-abiding Albertans. And so in response to that, we've prevented our municipalities in Alberta from crafting piecemeal arbitrary firearms legislation. We've notified our policing agencies that enforcement of this gun grab is not a priority for our police detachments, that they need to be focusing on criminals and illegal activity. We've also provided guidelines to our Crown prosecutors that prosecuting these charges stemming from this scheme is of low priority, and we've developed regulations making it absolutely clear that anyone looking to act as a confiscation agent for the federal government must obtain a provincial license or be in breach of provincial laws. The bottom line is this: we stand by our law-abiding gun owners, and we'll do everything that we can to make sure that honest Albertans are not made into criminals by illogical and politically motivated policies.
And you just heard Alberta Justice Minister saying that the province of Alberta is simply not going to participate nor implement any sort of confiscation effort coming from the Liberal federal government. That doesn't mean they're not going to try, though. But Alberta has remained defiant. That is something that you got to give the Conservative government of the province of Alberta, and it is that they've been consistent from the very beginning in the protection of those who own their property, their firearms, their guns legally. It is already very difficult to obtain a gun permit in Canada. Some people will say that it should be relaxed. Other people will say that that's just about the right amount of parameters that need to be met to make sure that the right people have a gun. You may have your opinion one way or the other, but the reality and the fact of the matter is that Canada has some of the most strict and stringent laws and rules when it comes to being able to obtain a gun permit. And now you're going after individuals who've put themselves through the process to be able to legally obtain a firearm, and you're not going after them because your incompetence and or deliberate behavior is creating a crime wave that we haven't seen in the past 40 years. So instead of going after real criminals, you're going after law-abiding gun owners. Guns are tools. Firearms are tools, and they do not shoot themselves. Just like a knife doesn't go and stab somebody by itself, they're a tool. Tools do not cause harm in and of themselves. They cause harm either by carelessness or a deliberate, concerted effort by somebody to cause harm. And it is proven time and time again that gun owners in Canada are some of the least likely to commit criminal offenses in the whole country. But yes, the province of Alberta has remained consistent in saying that they're not going to enforce any sort of confiscation effort in their jurisdiction, which I'm very glad to see as an Alberta resident. So this right here is an Alberta Next panel, which is basically an open mic town hall that the premier has been holding all over the province. This one here, I believe, was in Lethbridge, where a gentleman talks about how the Liberal federal government is trying to make lawful gun owners criminals overnight. And what is the government of Alberta going to do about that? Let's see.
Currently, we have a public safety minister who wants to come and take my legally obtained firearms, in which I took a safety course for, legally purchased, but he can't define what a restricted position acquisition license is. He had to recuse himself from a terrorist organization, which is the Tamale Tigers. I will not be handing them over to the federal government because I'm not supposed to give my firearms to criminals. So I'm not going, so I can't go to the range. I can't do my sport shooting with 90% of my firearms because I became a criminal overnight with an unjust gun grab fraud. I know that Premier Smith is familiar with the homeowner in Ontario who was just charged with injuring a home intruder who had a crossbow.
You should ask her about it.
Yeah, Canadians are being charged for protecting themselves, their families, and their property, and being backed into a corner through submission by the federal government. Where we're being told to leave our keys beside our unlocked door, as criminals have more rights than we do. So where would the Alberta Police Force stand in relation to the legal firearm owners?
It's a great question. I'm glad we ended on that. And I'm sorry to those of you still lining up. I did say that was it. Premier, can you address those ones first, and then we'll book it?
Well, let me tell you my frame on this. So the proper use of the criminal code power is the way the feds will regulate around, for instance, vehicular homicide. Like, there are ways that you can use your car that kill people, and they look at that.
That's what I was talking about. It's a tool. A firearm is a tool. They don't shoot themselves. A vehicle doesn't drive itself into a crowd. A knife doesn't go stabbing people by itself. It's a tool. You don't target the tool, you go after the criminals. That's what you do.
That as a criminal penalty, and they charge you. But you know what they don't do? They don't come in and say, red cars have a disproportionate number of accidents, therefore we're going to ban red cars and confiscate them, right?
Common sense.
They're able to see that there is one use of that particular piece of property that is criminal, and they let us regulate who gets a driver's license and who registers a car. So I'm just going to take that analogy a little bit further. They can regulate the criminal use of firearms. They can go after the bad guys who are breaking into people's houses with crossbows. And we will then regulate the legal use of firearms so you can continue to own them, collect them, use them for sport shooting, use them for hunting, and use them for other purposes. So we're working right now on what a legislative framework for an Alberta firearms license would look like. And we're going to fight it out because property and civil rights are our jurisdiction under Section 91 of the Constitution.
Right there, you got to give it to the government of Alberta and the premier. She's been consistent from day one. She has been consistent from day one when it comes to firearms. She hasn't given the Liberals an inch when it comes to lawful gun owners. And she's actually working towards creating, and to be fair, her voter base has been pushing for this for years now. A lot of grassroots pressure being put on her when it comes to that, and it's to get an Alberta firearms license. Albertans shouldn't need Ottawa to give them permission to have a legally obtained firearm. That should be local. That should be right here in Alberta. You have an Alberta license, you're able to go anywhere in the province. You should be able to go anywhere in Alberta to use it for legal purposes. And again, I'm glad to see that she hasn't wavered one bit when it comes to that topic, because that's very important. And one can't help but wonder, why is it that Liberal governments all over the world, in Europe, in the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, in Canada, are trying to disarm their population. Many of us will have our own theories, our own thoughts as to why. But here's a very interesting angle that I have, and it is based on facts, on a specific fact, on a specific report that came straight out of the government. You may be wondering, what's PJ referring to here? Well, check this out. This is an article right here that came out in 2024. So it came out last year. This is from the Daily Mail. I believe it was the National Post, a Canadian newspaper, that first reported on it, where they're talking about how the RCMP, which is federal police, basically the Canadian equivalent of the FBI, then there's CSIS, which is the equivalent of the CIA. So the RCMP, National Police, had a report, a secret report that wasn't supposed to come out, but it got leaked onto the public, where they're basically saying, as you guys can see here, secret police report warns Canadians may revolt once they realize just how broke they are under Trudeau, as many under 35 are unlikely to ever buy a home. This was in 2024, before the drama teacher himself, Justin Trudeau, finally resigned in disgrace. A report from our own very own police, our national police, from the government, saying that Canadians are in such bad shape, financially, economically, even socially, that once they realize just how bad things are, they may revolt. So if you don't want your population to revolt, at least if you want to contain said revolt, said revolution, what do? Well, you take their weapons, you disarm them, right? And it says the report was commissioned to provide special operational information for senior police officers and decision makers in the federal government. It warns that young people face an accelerating decline in living standards and says that most will be unable to ever afford a home. No shit. You just got to look at you just have to look at Canada. Canada is unrecognizable after a decade. Completely unrecognizable. This was a country in which you were able to afford a home. If you worked hard, you were able to purchase the house with relative ease. You just needed to keep a job, work hard enough, save some money, and you'll be able to put 5-10% down on a decent home. That a decent home will cost you about $250 on average, really anywhere in the country. Vancouver's always been kind of crazy, although it's gotten crazier than ever now. But anywhere else in the country, you were able to afford a decent home for around $250,000. Try twice as much now for the average house in most places in Canada. It says here, and it predicts that the country could collapse under pressure from economic crisis, ecological meltdown, and territorial disintegration. This right here, territorial disintegration. What do you guys think that means? Territorial disintegration. Independence. That's what that means. We're going to be witnessing within the next 5 years the Balkanization of Canada. Canada is Yugoslavia. It's just a matter of time before territories and provinces start to realize, you know what, this country simply isn't sustainable, and start looking at other options. And because the country is basically bankrupt, heading to bankruptcy, they won't be able to keep it together. It's going to fall apart by pressure, by gravity. Gravity itself, just the laws of physics are going to make Canada fall apart. And then you already have provinces like Alberta pushing really hard for independence. And it makes sense. It's called self-preservation. Why would Albertans stay in a country that is not representative of their values anymore? A country where their voice isn't heard. But anyways, the article continues. Police have warned Canada's leaders they will struggle to contain the fury at its deteriorating economy and a generational revolt by young people unable to ever buy a home. You can't make this stuff up. This is something that if it wasn't because it came straight from the government, you may be wondering like, well, this is probably fake. This right here is fake. Except it is not fake. It came straight from the government. I'm going to read a little bit more here. The secret report by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police paints an apocalyptical picture of the future for America's northern neighbor, predicting it will be riven by economic crisis, ecological meltdown, and territorial disintegration. Yeah, Yugoslavia. The report has caused a sensation in the Great White North after a heavily redacted version was released following a long-running access to information request by a Canadian academic. So why would they want to disarm their population? Well, there's your answer. That may be the answer right there. They fear a revolt. And it may or may not happen. That revolt may or may not happen, because what's happening in Canada is that the brain drain, those people that are suffering the most, a lot of young people, they're leaving. Those who can are packing it up and leaving. Canada is literally emptying itself of its most brilliant and bravest. They're leaving. And that's what's happening to Canada. So that's why I say often on this channel that I don't believe Canada exists as what it is today. I don't believe Canada continues to exist as the country that it is today in the next 5 years. In our lifetimes, we're going to witness the balkanization of Canada. Just sit and watch. We're getting closer and closer to it every single day. Hey, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to be notified every time a new video is published, hit the subscribe button and activate the notifications bell. It's completely free and it helps our channel grow. A heartfelt thank you to all our channel members. I really appreciate your support. See you all in the next one. Peace.